Coming up, Florida gets ready to take on the national champs, and Auburn gets ready to tangle with a tough crowd on the road. It's a busy weekend coming up around the league. We've got it all covered for you next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everybody. Welcome into SEC Country Live. Good to have you with us. We've been here now for really quite some time. Every Wednesday, 3 p.m., on the SEC Country Facebook page, the SEC Country Live YouTube page, and it's fun to be able to have this conversation with you each and every day here. As I mentioned in our open, it's a pretty busy weekend around the league. Not a ton of games of interest, but the games that are taking place, some of them have quite a bit of interest indeed. I want to highlight a couple of these right now as we go above the fold. With the big stories around the SEC. And I guess let me give you a big picture on the two big games for a moment. I want to get more deeply into something a Florida player has said going into the game Saturday against Alabama. Here is my big take on Florida, Alabama, Auburn, Penn State kind of combined together here for a moment. Auburn on the road, Florida hosting the national champs. It's this. I find there to be some similarities this weekend between Florida and Auburn in that I don't necessarily think either of those two teams has to win to do their job here this weekend. Now, I realize that for a Florida fan, that's desperately what you want to happen. You want your team to beat Alabama, and I understand that. And for Auburn, clearly you view it as a winnable game at Penn State. I understand why you would, and obviously you'd want to see your team win there in that spot. It can be a huge jumpstart to the career of Brian Harsin there on the Plains. I get all of that. There are moments, though, in the SEC where you do have to win. If you lose, it's hard to face your fan base the next day. If you lose, there are tough questions being asked. And for Florida right now, as more than a two-touchdown underdog on the road against Alabama, I don't think it's win or bust. I think Florida could send a pretty strong message to Georgia, the rest of the SEC East, if it plays well against Alabama on Saturday. And it might be a little bit of a signal for an Alabama team that coasted week one against Miami that the rest of the schedule is not going to be quite so easy. So I think the Florida could send a pretty significant message if it simply plays Alabama close this week. Ultimately, the game that matters most for them is the one that looms later on against Georgia. Similar for Auburn. This is the first-year coach, and Brian Harsin's very deep SEC West. I don't think anyone expects Auburn to be 10-2, 9-3. That's a level of expectation that's higher than what I think is realistic for Auburn. But against a top 10 team on the road, facing a hostile crowd with the whiteout, and we'll talk more about that here coming up in a moment. If you find a way to compete in that game, if you find a way to take it down to the wire, to keep it within the 6-point spread, if you find a way to do that on Saturday, then I think you're sending a message that Auburn's going to be a pretty tough out in a very deep SEC West. So we'll talk more about Auburn, Penn State in a moment. Let me begin, though, above the fold with Florida hosting Alabama. And this is one of those games that Dan Mullen's supposed to be really good at, right? Taking less talent, competing with a more talented team. Obviously, no one's more talented than Alabama. They are the reigning national champion. You're supposed to be able to, if you're Dan Mullen, take your 3-star guys, your Jimmies and Joes, and with some X's and O's, get the most out of them in a matchup like this. Sometimes, though, it seems like that some of the Florida players, though, don't quite fit into that underdog narrative of, hey, we're going to try to work hard and we're going to try to overcome a talent deficit. Some of the Florida players sometimes seem to kind of belie that a bit with some of the things they say to the media. Florida now, over the course of multiple coaches, has just been much more comfortable than most of the other teams in the SEC are with allowing their players to speak in kind of an unfettered fashion to the media. Now, I'm sure that for a lot of players, it's kind of nice. Hey, you go there to Florida, you can tweet what you want, you can say what you want in press conferences. I'm sure there's a great degree to which a lot of folks that might go to Florida kind of like that, right? It's like nobody's going to be telling me what to say. I'm going to say what I want. But there is also a reason oftentimes that programs try to keep a lid on what players are saying in a press conference situation. You certainly don't want to make a hard task more difficult. Maybe an example of that from one of Florida's key defenders, the edge rusher, BRENTON. I'll let you decide for yourself. First of all, let me show you a tweet as shared by Edgar Thompson, who covers the Florida Gators for the Orlando Sentinel, about the game against Alabama. Cox says, "We're ready, of course. The big question is, are they ready?" Now, I think that's pretty silly to ask that about Alabama, given the fact that we don't really see that many moments in time when Alabama isn't ready. Alabama's dominant almost every single game. In a game like this where a team thinks it's going to come within a couple of touchdowns of Alabama and, as I said before, try to keep things close. Alabama usually has something for teams like that at home, on the road, wherever else. And yes, I understand that Florida kept it close with Alabama last year in the SEC Championship, but also I'm not quite so sure Brenton Cox necessarily had a sterling game against the Crimson Tide there in that spot, nor did he back in 2018 when he had a chance to play against Alabama while still a member of the Georgia Bulldogs. But nonetheless, I don't quite think this rises to the level of bulletin board material necessarily, but it's something I would rather my guy not say going into the game. I mean, here's the challenge that Alabama always faces. When you win every game, and, just about, Alabama almost always does, when you're winning most of those games by a pretty comfortable margin, finding that week-to-week motivation is just not easy. And, new crop of players each and every year, young guys that kind of grow into a role. I think it can be easy for some Alabama players in different circumstances than the ones that Saban creates. I think it could be easy for some Alabama players to assume they just inherit the greatness that existed before them, and maybe their edge isn't quite there the way that it needs to be. So as a way of fighting against that happening, if you're Alabama, you're always trying to create some new reason to be motivated week after week. And if your opponent's going to do something to gift that to you, obviously you're going to take it. Even if it's kind of stretching things a little bit for us to say, well, Brenton Cox gave Alabama bulletin board material by wondering are they going to be ready for the game. Even if I'm kind of stretching it, or those who might bring this up as an issue might be stretching things a little bit by saying that's Cox giving bulletin board material, that's what coaches do behind the scenes. That's what they use their strength and conditioning staff for. That's what they use their underlings for, to push that message. Hey, Florida's best defensive player wonders if you're going to be ready. Are you working hard this week to show them that you are ready? Are you ready to go out there and show them on Saturday in Gainesville what you're all about? Of course that's what coaches do. So I'll give you a chance to hear Brenton Cox a little bit more there as well on the mindset that Florida has, the comfort that seemingly Cox has with his teammates going into the game, and the belief that even if it is Alabama, for Florida, it's really unlike any other game. This is Brenton Cox once again, this time with audio.
The winning formula is just everybody do their job. Coach Grantham always talk about synergy, so everybody bring all the energy they can and connect together. I mean, as long as we play together, we unstoppable. So that's all I got. We're unstoppable front four, unstoppable back seven, and got some new guys coming in the linebacker room, but it's all good. We ready.
I mean, just how geeked up do guys get for a game like this? I mean, it's going to be wild, isn't it?
It's SEC, every game like this. Every game. It's just Bama, though. But we see y'all more interested in this game, so we go give y'all what y'all want.
If you are a Florida fan right there, maybe you say Brenton Cox is coming across as very confident, very cool, not making the moment too big, and you maybe like that mindset. If you're an observer of the game, you almost wonder if he's a little too flippant there, that while you treat every game the same, the truth is playing Alabama is unlike playing anybody else because of the success they've had. And I guess I probably kind of find myself on the opposite end of that spectrum. I find myself kind of aligned with those who wonder, is that really what I want one of my best defensive players saying going to a game like this against Alabama? The truth is, no matter what Brenton Cox may have said, I actually think that Florida probably plays pretty well on Saturday. And I would be shocked if they won the game, but I'd also be shocked if Alabama won by, a 3-touchdown margin. Though we'll talk more about the point spread later on in our show. The line has been 16 at BetUS. My guess is Florida keeps within that spread. And part of that's just due to the fact that if Anthony Richardson's healthy enough, and I know that's been a debate and a discussion around Gainesville, how much he's been able to practice, and is it time to make Anthony Richardson the starting quarterback? I'll remind you that back in the spring, we actually predicted this day would arrive. Some Florida fans laughed at me for saying so, but it seems like that's what's coming true right now. But whether he starts or he's just healthy enough to play a lot, obviously Richardson has a chance to keep this game close. I, don't make too much one way or another what Brenton Cox says. I guess the attitude overall I find to be a little bit troubling going into a game like this. But ultimately, this is an Alabama team that you saw dominate Miami week 1. A lot of folks took note of that and said, same old Alabama. But to a degree, the Crimson Tide were a little bit sloppy last week against Mercer. Now, it's Mercer. It's one AA type opponent. Who really cares? And that's probably true. But this is an Alabama team that I'm not quite so sure is great offensively right now. They may show that to be the case against Florida on Saturday. But with a new quarterback, with a new coordinator, replacing so many key playmakers that made the 2018 offense hum the way that it did, I'm not quite so sure this is a great Alabama offense right now, and the extent to which it's just below that may be the door that's open for Florida to get in here and compete and make this game close on Saturday. I want to talk more about Penn State and Auburn coming up in a moment. Let me talk to some Florida fans here, though, and some Alabama fans on the subject of the big game coming up on Saturday between the Gators and the Crimson Tide. Matthew Jason Martin says, Bama by 3 touchdowns minimum. If Alabama makes that statement on Saturday, if they win this game as the commenter predicted by 3 touchdowns or more, that's a huge statement. And it would be a real signal right now that no one's close, because you can kind of squabble with the week 1 game against Miami, given the fact that the Hurricanes last week, did not really show up great against Appalachian State, and say, how big of a win is Miami week 1? You can say that if you want to. But if you do neutral site demolition of Miami, road game demolition of Florida, 2 of the first 3 weeks of the season handling Power 5 competition like that, then I think you'd say that Alabama has distinguished itself, even as the reigning national champions, knowing what they're capable of doing from years past, but just looking at the window of this year. If that's what Alabama does, winning by 3 touchdowns after having beaten up badly on Miami, you'd say that right now there is no team coming close to Alabama. Obviously, Georgia didn't have much offense against Clemson, had, a lot of offense last week against UAB, not really testing itself this week very much, at least expected to against South Carolina. Ohio State's already lost. Clemson's already lost. Oklahoma could have lost week 1 to Tulane. If Alabama wins this game, as our Bama fan commenter predicted a moment ago, by 3 touchdowns or more, Alabama will have established itself as a distant number 1 team with really no one else, even in the rearview mirror in any way, that can be seen there. Moose Thames says, I'm more worried about Vanderbilt than Florida, so a little bit of trash talk there. Brian Burnett says, it's such a Gators thing to open their mouth and give Bama any material to use. And, Brian, I kind of agree with you on that. It's the kind of thing we see from Florida going into a game like this that we just don't see from other teams. And I'm sure it probably works to their advantage in the recruiting trail sometimes to say, hey, come here, you can be yourself, you can let loose, you can let your personality shine, especially in a name, image, likeness era, but I think it does make games like the game against Alabama harder to win. I don't deny that. Ralph Davis says they're locked in this week. Our 5th string could have beaten the team last week, so he's checking in. Lisa Singleton Rickman says let them run their mouths, and so Alabama fans getting loaded up on that. Jody Booth says, only time I'll be pulling for the Gators. It's actually really interesting. And obviously Florida and Alabama played a lot in SEC championship games. And, we're kind of a long way removed from Florida's glory years, the Spurrier era, the Urban Meyer era. That starts to feel like a long time ago after a while. But because of how successful Florida once was, there are a lot of fan base in the SEC that hate Florida. Now, Georgia and Florida have kind of a natural rivalry. Florida and Tennessee have a rivalry that's kind of born out of competitive games back in the 1990s, but they're like Kentucky fans and other fans around this league that have grown to hate Florida over the years. So you've got all kinds of people that just on spec seemingly cheer for whoever's playing Florida. I'm guessing that's true for a lot of fans around the SEC. But conversely, on the other side, Alabama's very much the same way. Alabama's got its natural rivalries with its in-state foe Auburn, obviously 3rd Saturday in October against Tennessee. But because of the success that Alabama's enjoyed for generations, you've got LSU fans, the Mississippi schools. You got all these schools that don't like Alabama either. So there are a lot of programs who may say, I don't typically like to root for Florida, but I guess against Alabama I'll have to. Or the opposite of that, I don't typically like to root for Alabama, but I guess if they're playing Florida, then I guess I got to go out there and root for the Crimson Tide here in this spot. You do have some of that going on right now, and I think that's kind of interesting. Kevin Cook predicts that Florida finishes 3rd in the SEC East. Obviously, some Kentucky love coming for now after Kentucky went out there and got the win against Missouri last week. Jeremy Bettis says Bama's won 6 of its last 12 national championships. How much more can Bama separate themselves? But obviously you understand the point that I'm making, that every year is its own story. And while clearly Alabama historically, certainly during the Nick Saban era, has been the top program in college football, I think in the measuring stick of what we're looking at 2021, you're trying to see if any team is close to Alabama. And if Alabama fumbles around and plays close with Florida, then maybe the door is open for somebody else. But it would be quite a demoralizing scene for much of the rest of college football if Alabama is handling its business easily against a Florida team that has tested itself as of yet, that's been very, comfortable and, kind of easing into the start of its season, it'd be pretty demoralizing for the rest of the country if that's the kind of team that Alabama beats up on there in week one. So let me get a couple YouTube comments. We'll move on. We'll talk more about Auburn and Penn State here. G. Grace Bama Boy checking in to say that Florida fans are in deep imaginary state on here. When reality sets in on Saturday, they will need therapy. So that's G. Grace, a big Bama fan, kind of weighing in a pretty strong way on that. String Gene says Bama has to beat somebody to be number one. In other words, he wants to see Alabama actually go out there and prove it as a road favorite on Saturday. Brent Hickman checking in to say it's the only time I fully hope you're right when it comes to Bama dominating. Obviously, Brent, like some of the folks around here that don't like Florida very much. George, who is a Gators fan, with the Gators logo as part of his YouTube avatar there, saying, hey, listen, Florida isn't Georgia. We have won 3 national titles since 1980. Georgia has 0. Don't listen to the Georgia fans. And there are obviously a lot of Georgia fans that check in on the show because I do Dog Nation Daily. I'm a Georgia fan. So you get a lot of Georgia folks that kind of congregate on here because of that. But here's the thing I try to tell George and some of these people, and you got to understand this, that at a certain point, bragging on the fact that you've won national championships more recently starts to feel a little bit weird because it's been, going on 13 years since your own, most recent national championship for Florida. And yes, you won a handful of them, right? You won 08, 06, 96. Florida had a great run of success there. But if your last national championship came in 2008, do you realize that the current recruits who will be playing major college football, next year were what? Kindergartners the last time Florida won a national championship? In other words, they have no memory whatsoever of that. So if you're talking to somebody like me, and I'm 40, early 40s, then you want to say, BA, it's been 1980 since George won a national championship. A zinger like that works on me. But to the recruits that are about to make their college decision in terms of programs that have any national championship relevance whatsoever, they obviously think about Alabama in that regard. They think about Clemson in that regard because it's been within the last couple of years. LSU's been in that discussion. But Florida is not a relevant national championship level program for the average recruit, the constituency here that matters most, because it has been so long since Florida's won its last national championship, and it's important not to lose sight of that. Greg Steele says, let's see what Greg Steele says up here, that you left Georgia out of that conversation. I guess I know why. Nobody roots for Georgia except for dog fans. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But Greg, I'm glad you're checking in here. Johnny Lester says Gator Nation better be prepared to be demoralized. So pretty good stuff and all that. We're going to take a lot more comments today, I promise. We're also going to have a fun guest later on, Ryan Brown. A lot of you remember him as a very successful radio host in Alabama for a long time. Now doing a brand new show. Same guys, new platform. It's called The Next Round. Ryan's going to be with us coming up in, about 20 till. We're going to do that about 2:40 Central, 3:40 Eastern time. We'll do that here coming up in just a minute, about 15 minutes or so. We'll catch up with him, and that'll be really fun stuff. For now, though, let's shift our gears here for a moment. Alabama, Florida. We'll come back to that in our comments section throughout the show. How about Auburn, though? Getting ready to go on the road. Penn State on Saturday. It is the whiteout game. I'm actually on one of the TVs on the screen over here. The whiteout stuff on the ESPN TV cameras right now. So big deal anytime the Nittany Lions get a chance to dress up in white. They didn't get a chance to do this a year ago. It's a hostile road environment. And apparently we have some intel that Penn State students already getting pretty fired up about this. Let me show you a Penn State fan account with a little bit of video of those Nittany Lions students, those Penn State students already getting decked out, ready to go for the whiteout. Is Auburn ready for what they're about to experience in State College here this weekend? Take a look at this.
We are Penn State!
Now, I think that it's pretty humorous to me, and we can probably bring that down a little bit. I think that's pretty humorous to me that, like, in the world of the Big Ten, this is supposed to be the kind of atmosphere that no one knows what to do with, the kind of atmosphere that everybody's afraid of. Oh, my gosh, how is an SEC team going to survive with Todd and Kevin and Devin and the rest of this crew, jumping around here? This somehow some insurmountable home field advantage. The truth is there have been 16 wideouts. Penn State's only won 8 of them. So I don't know that I think that Auburn's a great team necessarily, but I also don't know that the Penn State wideout, on the basis of its own history as an event, Penn State's own history having performed there, I don't quite know this is the kind of thing that any SEC team's going to be scared of. Now, Brian Harsin, maybe as a brand new SEC coach, maybe he in his coaching career hasn't really experienced anything like this. Maybe he'll have his team poorly prepared for the game. But the notion this is the kind of scary thing that Auburn's going to wilt and die in, I certainly hope Auburn represents the SEC better than that up in Happy Valley. I'd like to think that it's not going to be one of those things that Auburn's totally overcome by the moment. They may still lose the game, but Auburn's played in a lot of tough atmospheres in the past. Year over year, they play about the toughest schedule in the country, and that's been true now for quite some time. So for what it's worth, Auburn coach Brian Harsin was asked this week kind of, what he thought about the crowd noise, what his team was doing to prepare for the wideout. And listen, he's seemingly ready to take all this head on. This is what Brian Harsin said about wideout conditions in Penn State on Saturday. Take a look at this.
I think this is part of what makes college football and just football in general so special is you get to play in environments like that. Embrace it. Be a guy that embraces that. Enjoy the opportunity to play in somebody else's house and to go in there and play good football. That's not going to be an excuse for us. We're not going to let that be. We're not going to make any excuses throughout the week. We'll have all the opportunities to prepare ourselves properly, and if we do that right, then it's just a matter of getting out there and playing, enjoying the environment, enjoying the opportunity to be in somebody's house, and then going out there and executing what we need to do.
So that is Brian Harsin, by the way, if you saw the video a moment ago, maybe a wide out for Penn State more ways than one on Saturday, if you get my drift with all of that. But the point is, that's Brian Harsin saying, hey, we're not going to use it as an excuse. We're going to take it head on. And it's another one of those things I said before, unfortunately for Harsin year one, I think he's got a lot of losses coming his way. I think this is a team its BetUS season win total is about 6.5. I think it was actually 6.5. 7-5. I think for Auburn this year, given the schedule that it plays, would be a pretty good season. But Auburn has a chance to send a message. Now you can send kind of a lowercase letter message of, hey, we went on the road at Penn State. We played that game pretty close. The rest of the SEC better realize we're not going to be an easy out. We're going to be a tough out anytime you play us, and that's one kind of message. But there's also this opportunity available for Auburn. I mean, you certainly can't say, this is a Penn State team last year that got beaten up pretty bad by Maryland at home. So, Penn State is not is not one of these teams that can't be beaten when you go on the road to Beaver Stadium there. You can win this game. And let's say that Auburn does. They're underdog, not expected to, but let's say they were to. You start talking about now a game coming up at LSU, and all of a sudden the LSU game seems way easier after having seen LSU lose at UCLA and kind of goof around and play with its food against McNeese State. All of a sudden now you're talking about an LSU game on the road. Even though Auburn hasn't won there since 1999, all of a sudden that seems like a little bit more manageable of a game. Like, it is entirely possible, not probable, but it is possible that Auburn is undefeated on October 9th, hosting Georgia with big crowd there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And in that particular game, all of a sudden now it's not Auburn facing the hostile crowd. All of a sudden it's Auburn being propelled by a hostile crowd against a team like Georgia that has not beaten very much. And one of the main reasons that Gus Malzahn got fired is because of Auburn's inability to beat Georgia. It's not beating Alabama. They've done that plenty. They've beaten them 3 times since 2013. It's beating Georgia that Gus Malzahn found really difficult. And it is entirely possible that Auburn on October 9th has an undefeated record, 2 big road wins, a chance to host Georgia in that spot. But it is more probable, though, that Auburn probably slips up here at Penn State. Not quite ready for a moment like this. Bo Nix, not necessarily a quarterback you trust. Can you win a game like this on the road, leaning on your running game? Is Derek Mason ready to dial up something defensively, taking advantage of the skill set of a guy like, say, Owen Popo here? This is a pretty fascinating game to watch. And, for the most part, I like giving strong opinions on shows like this. I like telling you what I think. When it came to the Florida Alabama game off the top of the show, I don't mind telling you, I think that despite what Brenton Cox may have said, I think that Florida actually does compete with Alabama on Saturday, keeping it closer than the experts think. I don't mind telling you I have a strong opinion on a game when I do have one. I'm also not going to make up a strong opinion when maybe I don't have one. And when it comes to Auburn with Harsin on the road in this big spot on Saturday, I'm not entirely sure what to expect. I have every reason to believe that Auburn could play close and could be a factor here. But it's also one of those moments that a program like this that fired its previous coach for a reason, that's had a lot of roster turnover throughout all of that. It could be one of those things where they're looking to they just find themselves in too tough of a spot right here. It is a fascinating game, though. I'm looking forward to watching it. Coming up, we'll talk to Ryan Brown about that about 10 minutes from right now. Ryan, they're in the state of Alabama. He's been talking Auburn, Penn State all week. This should be a really good conversation and a fun weekend as you get ready for that. We'll have more of your comments on this game coming up in a little bit there, too. Let's also bounce around to a couple other things for a moment. Georgia hosts South Carolina on Saturday. Georgia a 31-point favorite. Georgia hasn't been favored by more than 30 in SEC games since September of 2018. So you're talking about a long time for Georgia in a spot like this. Gamecocks fresh off a win against East Carolina last week. There's a chance that Luke Doty may return for the Gamecocks at quarterback here, but probably more likely you stick with a guy like Zeb Nolan because Georgia's defense has been so good that throwing a just back from injury quarterback into the Wolves in a situation like this just might be a little bit of a tricky spot all the way around. But actually on the Georgia side, what continues to be interesting, especially for people who can maybe kind of outside the bubble of UGA who aren't following Georgia quite as closely, what exactly is going on with JT Daniels, who was healthy and started the Clemson game. Not a great day for the Georgia offense. Missed the game last week against UAB. Georgia actually played very well in absence of Daniels last week. But now moving into the South Carolina game, the status for Daniels is still uncertain. My presumption is Daniels will not start and not play against South Carolina on Saturday. And as Kirby Smart kind of let us know in the update on Daniels this week, the guy who did start for Georgia last week against UAB, now he may be a little bit banged up too. What is exactly going on with Georgia quarterbacks? Let's let Kirby Smart tell us. Take a listen to this.
JT feels much better. He's continued to improve. I think he's better now than he was on Saturday. I don't know that he's 100%, but he's certainly getting closer to that. Stetson is repping, JT's repping, and Carson's repping. So Stetson's actually got some lower back issues that he strained some stuff, but he's able to go. But I don't know if he's 100%. He's been dinged up since Monday morning, but he went out and practiced as well. So they're all three practicing, and I wouldn't say 100. I think Carson's 100% healthy, but the other two are still pushing back.
One of the things we talked about a little earlier in the show is what happens to the rest of college football if Alabama beats Florida by 3 touchdowns on Saturday. That would be a little bit of a demoralizing moment a bit, and it would signal a gap between Alabama and the next best team in college football. As of now, the next best team both in the polls and also probably common public perception as well is probably Georgia. And obviously, now listen, don't mind telling you, clearly I have a bias here. I want Georgia to close the gap against Alabama, but are they actually doing that? Will they actually do that as the season goes along? I think one of the things that is imperative there for Georgia, if that's going to happen, you got to get a healthy JT Daniels back. And I don't just mean in time to play Florida on October 30th. I'm thinking about, as I mentioned before, Georgia-Auburn on October 9th has the look of a pretty interesting game right now if Auburn does some taking care of its business, including playing Penn State on Saturday. Georgia also plays Arkansas the week before that on October 2nd. You probably want to have your best quarterback, your best offensive foot forward for games like that. And I would also say, you want to have that group comfortable playing together before you get to those games. That if Georgia really is going to be a true threat to Alabama, getting a healthy JT Daniels back is obviously a very important part of that. And as of right now, on the basis of what you just heard Kirby Smart say there, it's not exactly obvious when that'll be. So I find that to be pretty interesting all the way around, that for now, Georgia's dealing with a little bit of a mystery at its quarterback spot. Almost certainly won't see J.D. Daniels on Saturday against South Carolina. May not need him. Georgia's more than a 30-point favorite. But when will you see J.T. Daniels playing quarterback for Georgia again? Unfortunately, your guess may be quite as good as mine. All right, it's Ryan Brown coming up from the next round. We'll talk to him about all the big games coming up around the SEC. We'll also look at how the coaching search at USC, after Clay Helton's been fired, how that impacts the rest of the SEC or the rest of college football, including the SEC. We'll do that coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, let's highlight our BetUS best bets for a moment. And obviously, when you think about getting some action, some point spread, playing down on the games here this week, what I want you to think about, my friends at BetUS. They've been doing this for more than 25 years. It's America's most popular sports book, and you don't get to be that way unless you're taking really good care of your players. And BetUS wants to give you an indication of how well they're taking care of all of its players by showing you how well they're going to take care of you right from the word go. That means when you sign up for the very first time, use the promo code SEC125. This is super easy to remember. SEC125 is the promo code. When you do so, you're going to get 125% bonus on your initial deposit. Simple math here. If you put $100 in, they're going to give you $125 on top of that. That means you start in your account with $225. You're playing with more money than you started with before you even place your first bet. That's good stuff. But you got to go to BetUS.com. You've got to use the promo code SEC125 to take advantage of that terrific offer. So let's bounce through a few of these BetUS best bets for a moment. Let's talk about the game we were just discussing, South Carolina against Georgia. Georgia's a 31-point favorite. Teams usually favored by 30 or more don't have a great history necessarily. Georgia no different on that. You're talking about a team that's just 2-6 in its last 8 when favored by 30 or more. They haven't been a 30-plus point favorite in SEC play since September 2018, a game they failed to cover in a 38-12 win against Tennessee. But I think that Georgia is probably still the play here. This is a Gamecocks team that's thin from a roster standpoint. I think Georgia's got some motivation on its side here. I'm not telling you this is the most valuable line to bet because 31 points is obviously a lot. But if I'm going to lean in this direction, I am going to take the 31 there with Georgia. The game on the board I probably like more than any is Alabama and Florida. I told you before, even as a Georgia fan who's obviously prone not to like the Gators very much, I do like Florida plus the 16 here in this spot. There are a couple of things you got to keep in mind here. This is only going to be the third time in Dan Mullen's tenure as Florida coach that the Gators have been point spread underdogs at home. The last 2 games in that instance were not only Florida covers, they were outright wins. I'm talking about a 24-13 against Auburn in 2019 and a 27-19 win against LSU in 2018. Florida winning outright as a home underdog in the only 2 previous instances under Dan Mullen. Of course, Alabama typically pretty good in these spots. When you think about them being on the road as a favorite of between 11 and 19 points, they're 7-1 in their last 8 instances. But the one time they didn't, go back to 2017, on the road at Mississippi State, 31-24 win as a 14-point favorite. The coach on the other side, you guessed it, the guy who'll see him on Saturday, that's Dan Mullen. So I'd be surprised if Florida wins outright, but I think plus 16, there's value there. Auburn and Penn State's a little bit of a guessing game for me, but 6 points seems like a lot. I'll take Auburn to keep it close and maybe lose late. I've been against the Mississippi schools all year long. I'm not going to change my mind on that just because of some impressive performances in recent weeks. Ole Miss looked good against Louisville, but Tulane looked good against Oklahoma. 14.5 seems like a bargain for the Green Wave. Mississippi State surprised me last week by beating NC State. They find themselves, after 3-point dogs at home a week ago, they are 3-point favorites on the road this week. Do with that what you will. I'll go with Memphis. There's one top 25 matchup, not including an SEC team this week. That's Arizona State, BYU. If BYU can win the Holy War, I think they can also beat Sparky here. I will take BYU on all of that. And remind you, one more time, check out BetUS.com for your chance to show that you know more than I do when it comes to making picks like this. Use the promo code SEC125 to get your bet down. You'll get a 125% bonus on your initial deposit when you use the promo code SEC125. BetUS.com for more on that. Promo code SEC125, 125% initial deposit bonus. That is good stuff all the way around. All right, I'm supposed to do the look at the USC coaching search right now. I'm running a little bit late. Michael, let's go ahead and bring on Ryan Brown from the next round, and then we'll get ready to talk about the USC coaching search after that. So after we speak to Ryan, who I think is just a really talented guy talking about the SEC and college football, understanding the landscape across the SEC, after we speak to Ryan, we'll get into a couple of the key rumors involving the USC coaching search, how it could impact the SEC, and if nothing else, just kind of an interesting look or two at some of the big names that are kind of involved in that discussion. So we'll do that coming up. there is a team facing an SEC school here this weekend that's got a pretty clever way of, I don't know if you call it trolling or what, but certainly honoring its history, and SEC fans will get their attention on that. There was an Alabama player this week who said something pretty bizarre when it comes to a Nick Saban, so we'll talk about that before we're done on today's show. Still a lot of ground to cover, lot of chatter to be had when it comes to all of this, and we'll catch up with Ryan Brown here coming up in just a little bit. All right, let's just send him a text to see if he's still good to go for us, and we'll take a couple comments while we get ready to say hello to him. Brent Hickman checking in. Tavius Curry also checking in and saying Auburn played in 2 and should have been in 3, 1-1. Can Georgia or Oklahoma say that? So Tavius Curry may be an Auburn fan kind of arguing for his program here a little bit. Auburn had its shot in 2004. Obviously, everybody remembers that. And really, in 2004, I thought an undefeated Auburn team probably deserved the playoff nod over Oklahoma that year. It was not a playoff back then. It was a BCS title game. If you're an Auburn fan, you want to make an argument for your team in 2004. I got no beef with that. Now, maybe no one was beating USC that year, and that's fine to say, but Auburn had a decent argument in 2004. In 2013, listen, they probably rode the horseshoe a lot of luck along the way towards a national championship game spot against Florida State. Had their chance to win that one, came up short. In 2017, had it taken care of its business against Georgia. Who knows how things work out there at that spot? But Auburn fans obviously feeling pretty good about their team ahead of a big road date at Penn State coming up on Saturday. G. Grace, Bama boy, in the comments section, still going hard at some of these Florida folks. G. Grace feeling pretty good about his team right now. Let me go back over here to Facebook for a moment. Jonathan Mixon says, coaching got nothing to do with it. Last year was down to a few turnovers. Bama plays mistake-free football, but young quarterback hasn't been tested. And I think that's one of the things that I do probably find the most interesting about Alabama on Saturday. As I said before, not that many people had much of a reason to watch the Mercer game all that close. I think those that did kind of thought Alabama looked a little sloppy on offense. And that's also maybe a lack of motivation against a team that had no shot. But I do think Alabama's got a little something to prove when it goes on the road on Saturday, the recent history of the program notwithstanding. In fact, let me find out more about this game and everything else happening around the SEC. Guy who's been a very successful radio host across the SEC landscape for a long time, now doing a really cool new media venture that I want to make sure that you're all aware of. It is Ryan Brown, one of the hosts of The Next Round, and he joins us here on SEC Country Live. Ryan, thanks so much for spending a little time with us today, and I hope you're doing well. All right, we'll get that squared away and get him back on here in just a moment. Jerry Popham also checking in on the subject of Penn State here on Facebook. Good stuff there on that. Let's see what else the Facebook commenters have to say right now. Mike Hardy says he thinks that Georgia slaughters Auburn on October the 9th. And, I think what the next few weeks are going to tell us is, how big of a favorite Georgia is in a game like that. And if there's any kind of argument to be made for Auburn whatsoever. What I think is pretty interesting is, and a lot of you are Auburn fans, and you can tell me maybe more so, I get the sort of impression that Auburn fans right now are in a little bit of a wait-and-see mode. They're a little quiet right now. They want to wait and find out what kind of team they have before they talk too much trash. But next couple of weeks, if you think about the road game at LSU coming up shortly after the Penn State game, next couple of weeks tell us a lot about Auburn. And as promised, a guy who knows all this really well, Ryan Brown, one of the hosts of The Next Round, really cool new show, cool new media venture. He joins us here on SEC Country Live. Ryan, appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing some of it with us, and hope you're doing well.
Man, I'm awesome. Hope you guys are okay.
Yeah, we're doing really well. And I want to let folks hear about the show that you're doing here coming up in a moment. Let me get a couple football things in with you before we get there on that. Talked about Auburn a moment ago. I think it's a fun game to watch on TV. I have no idea which direction this is going. I don't quite know what to make about the early stage of the Brian Harsin era here. I don't think the wide-out crowd is going to be all that intimidating for an SEC team that's seen environments like this before. But do you have much of a handle on how you expect Auburn to play in what is at least a tough road environment, if not the toughest of all time, the way that Big Ten fans might want us to think? Do you have any handle on how Auburn plays on Saturday?
No, it's hard to get one because they have played nobody. And even Auburn fans realize that. I mean, this is not taking a shot at Auburn. Their fans realize that Akron and Alabama State are far from the level of competition that Auburn's going to have to play this year. I mean, those might be – I'm not even going to say they might be. Those are the two easiest games on Auburn's schedule.
Yeah.
the rest of Auburn's schedule is more difficult than what they've already played. So it's going to be a step up. There's no doubt about that. And we've already seen Penn State tested. Penn State went on the road against Wisconsin and played a really, really good Wisconsin defense and ended up getting the win. Now, they didn't look great on offense doing it, but at least we've seen them tested. So I think that's the big question mark here is you've got a Penn State team that I guess you kind of know what you're getting with them, but there is no way of knowing what you're getting with this Auburn team right now.
I'm sure you and I are the same in that we probably don't want to get into any like the COVID controversy, stuff like that. But as a way of keeping it about football, it seems like in the early going, Harsin had some real critics around that Auburn program for fairly, unfairly, whatever was going on there. And there just seemed to be a little bit of a wait-and-see attitude about him. I'm also thinking about, some of the stuff he said about Alabama when he first took the job. And, boy, he just kind of felt like an outsider there from the very beginning. Now that they are 2-0 and his team's played a couple of games, has some of that kind of stuff started to shake off a little bit? Are Auburn fans fully embracing him? Is the media giving him a break now? I mean, is he getting settled in now more than it seemed like he was for a while during the offseason?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think Auburn fans, and this is not meant as a disrespect to Brian Harsin. He talks a really good game. I mean, I think he represents himself well. So I think Auburn fans like that. And Gus Malzahn, one of his faults was the guy was just kind of boring and didn't say a whole lot and said the same things over and over again. And Harsin hasn't done that. He's kind of taken a hard stance on some things like just today. He was asked about the Penn State, what you were talking about earlier, the difficulty of playing there.
Yeah. And
he said, if anybody's thinking about that, they need to ask to miss the game and we'll put somebody else on the flight. And Auburn fans love that kind of attitude, and I think he's presented himself well. His teams have played clean football. They look, again, Auburn fans get it. They know football. They know these are not good teams they're playing. But it's a team that looks pretty well coached. So I think he's checked a lot of boxes. He's done a lot of things right so far. But ultimately, this, the coach at Auburn is going to be judged how he plays against Georgia and how he plays against Alabama, to a lesser degree how he plays against LSU and Mississippi State and Ole Miss and Florida when they play Florida and teams like that. So, Brian Harsin has done everything right on the field so far, but it's just now getting started for him. But, yeah, to answer your question, if he had some critics, I think they backed off a little bit. He got beat up a little bit for, his stance on the COVID vaccine to the point that he basically had to have a press conference clarifying where he stood on the COVID vaccine, which is just incredible that he had to do that. But he did, and I think Auburn fans were okay with it. And ultimately, it hasn't, top-line players have not missed a critical game because of it. So until that happens, I don't think anybody really cares.
I sort of have a sneaking suspicion that Florida keeps it close with Alabama on Saturday. Mullen's typically pretty good in the rare instances when Florida's a underdog at home. I'm not sure what to make of Alabama yet, other than they're the defending national champions and they're a behemoth each and every year. Beyond that, I'm not quite so sure what to make of this specific Alabama team as of late. Maybe still sleepwalking a little bit here at the beginning of the year. I'd be surprised if Florida won, but this is not a game in which I expect Alabama to go into the swamp, win by 30. What do you see Florida's chances of maybe hanging around and making this an entertaining show on Saturday?
Honestly, I think they're pretty low of, being within one score. Can they keep it, 10-14? Yeah, they could do that. Again, this is the first road start for Bryce Young and a number of these Alabama players, but primarily Bryce Young. But nothing has seemed to fluster him yet. He looked very at ease in his first start against Miami 2 weeks ago. The offense did not play well against, a much more inferior opponent in Mercer Saturday. But, I'm just there are a couple things that seem to be constants watching Alabama football. Number one, when Nick Saban has the press conference where he talks about how crappy practice has been all week, you can almost guarantee two things. Number one, that Alabama is going to come out kind of flat because Saban's pretty good about reading that stuff. And then number two, the next game after that is going to be one of the cleanest, best played games they have because it gives Nick Saban coaching moments. It gives him correctable moments without taking a loss. So I imagine this week's practice for Alabama has been one of the best practice weeks that this team will have all year. So I think you'll see a clean, energized performance by Alabama Saturday. The other constant, you mentioned Dan Mullen in situations where he's a home dog. The counter to that, Brandon, would be Dan Mullen in situations where he's facing Nick Saban.
Yeah.
He's never beaten Saban.
Right.
And in fact, it's been a lot of blowouts. I mean, I don't have the average score in front of me, but it ain't pretty. Let me go ahead and tell you. Now, a lot of that was at Mississippi State, only one time at Florida. But still, Dan Mullen against Nick Saban has not gone well for him.
You know, listen, it's Ryan Brown who's joining us, a longtime radio host. And one of my things is, I always want radio shows to talk a lot about college football. That's how I first, discovered Ryan, doing good stuff there on the radio in Alabama for a long time. But it's a brand new venture now and new ways to catch the show that he's doing each and every day. And I'd encourage my audience to check it out. Tell us more about the next round, the new show that you're doing. Obviously, the same cast of characters you've done it with in the past, but kind of some new ways to connect with that. So let our audience know how they can find you.
Yeah, it's very easy. Make sure. Did I lose you guys? I lost you guys for a second.
No, I'm here.
No, it's nextroundlive.com is our website, nextroundlive.com. The Next Round is the name of our show, and basically we're everywhere but radio now. You can watch us on YouTube Live, Twitch, Periscope, Facebook. You can listen to us. We've got an app. We stream live 24/7. We're live 9 to 1, but our show streams all day. So we try to make it as easy as possible to get us. But the best way of doing it is just going to our website, nextroundlive.com, and all the info is right there.
You guys do a great job. Always a fun conversation to listen in on, and certainly a fun conversation to participate with you here on the show today. So thanks for being with us, and hopefully we'll get a chance to chat really soon.
Hey, I'd love to. Anytime. It's always fun talking college football. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes to do it.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate your time. All right, good stuff there. Ryan Brown, the host of The Next Round, one of the hosts there, and doing a great job. And as he said, and listen, that's kind of the venture we're kind of all in now. It's like, you use those platforms that are available. It's amazing how technology makes it so much easier to reach people than it once was. And you don't have to have some big, clearinghouse or some thing like that. You can just kind of speak to people directly. And that's kind of a cool thing about what we do here in SEC Country Live and what they're doing there with The Next Round. So good stuff all the way around on that. Okay, I got a lot to do in a little bit of time. So I want to take more of your comments, and that's going to be a big part of what we're going to do here. But I also want to look at the USC coaching search situation for a moment, something I was already supposed to do, but we kind of took too many comments a minute ago. So here is the deal. You understand this. Clay Helton is out at USC, and now there's the question of, well, who is in? Who's coming up next? And I love coaching searches. My favorite time of the year in college football, believe it or not, is almost weirdly that early winter time, kind of late December, early January, when the coaching carousel is spinning in a big way. There's always, kind of a lot going on with that. I love coaching rumors, and the fact that we've got a pretty prominent coaching rumor starting this early in the calendar, I think is a really pretty cool thing all the way around. And when it's a USC job, the biggest of the big names are going to be potentially mentioned in connection to this. So let's bounce through the rumor on this here for a moment. Let's start with Urban Meyer, whose name has shown up here a couple of times as a potential candidate, so much so that when Meyer, obviously the former Florida coach and Ohio State coach as well, when he met with the media in Jacksonville, his current employer as head coach of the NFL's Jaguars, he was asked, hey, you want to refute this rumor that you're a candidate for the USC job back in college after you just took the NFL job? And Urban Meyer did his part to do that. This is Urbs in Jacksonville.
Unfortunately for you, some rumors came out yesterday connecting you to the USC job. I just want to give you the opportunity to refute it so that you can put it to bed.
No chance. I'm here and committed to try to build an organization.
Okay.
So I'm of two minds on this. On the one hand, I agree with what some of those like NFL blue check reporters have said, that if Meyer wanted the USC job, he could have maybe had it last year. They would have moved off of Clay Helton a year ago if they had thought they had a chance to hire Urban Meyer. That makes some sense. But I think what's also very real, and I'm not quite so sure how many people want to acknowledge this is, and this is not an NFL show, but I'll give you an NFL take here for a moment. It certainly appears like Urban Meyer is overseeing a potential disaster with the Jaguars. And I'm not overreacting to just a week one loss to the Houston Texans, but there's a lot coming out of Jacksonville that Meyer is trying to run this like a college team, and that's not going to work. And think about Nick Saban, who's spends a couple of years in Miami and is like, I don't know if this is for me. I think that Saban could have stuck around the NFL and been successful. I just think he preferred the college way of doing business. And Urban Meyer may come to that decision quicker than Nick Saban. So this idea that Meyer says, I'm not taking that job, not interested in the USC job, I'm not quite so sure I believe him. At least take it at full face value that he's not willing to consider that job whatsoever. I'm just not quite so sure. I could consider that like an open and shut case when it comes to Urban Meyer on that. But that's not the only big name to have a connection to the USC job, at least according to some. Dan Patrick, former SportsCenter host, popular radio show host, notoriously wrong about everything. I mean, listen, I love Dan. I mean, I think that Dan's a pretty entertaining dude, and I'm not that mad that he has so many erroneously sourced college football news nuggets. That doesn't bother me all that much, but it's important to note that if we're going to reference Dan Patrick here, it's important to point out the track record of him talking about what all kinds of crazy stuff that he's kind of thrown out there over the course of the last couple of years. His latest example of that, I'll let you be the judge, his belief that there is another big name candidate who is not only being sought out by USC, is also himself maybe doing a little seeking for this job. This is Dan Patrick on the radio just from just this week. Here's Dan Patrick.
There is mutual interest, USC and a current college coach. In fact, this coach was asked about the USC vacancy rumors yesterday. His name is James Franklin at Penn State.
As you guys know, I can't stand in any form of distraction. So I'll discuss this today with the Leadership Council so that we can make sure that all of our energy is on our preparation for Auburn.
That's a non-denial denial.
James Franklin didn't even give a fake no. You got to get that. I'm totally focused on the team. I don't care about coaching rumors.
By the way, another chance to see the Penn State students there. I'm sure they would not be jumping around and giving you the chant about James Franklin leaving. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, the USC is a big enough job that any big name coach that's not like really deeply connected to his current school, almost anyone would be interested in it. But do I think that USC is an obviously better job than Penn State right now? Believe it or not, I don't. Even though the recruiting ground is more fertile around California, Southern California there, a lot's changed in the last 5 years. And listen, I'm going to be very narrow in how I kind of speak about this, but there's, I think, a lot of reasons to wonder, does the Pac-12 have my back? If I'm a USC coach, is this a league that's committed to college athletics? Is this a university that's committed to college athletics? Or are the administrations of my conference and my school, are they going to get drawn off sides by every peripheral issue that shows up? And if I'm a potential candidate for USC, you better believe I'm paying attention to what's happened in that league, in that state, over the last 12, 18 to 24 months. I'm noticing those kinds of things. Now, I think the Pac-12 has a new commissioner now, and I think that things are starting to look a little different for that league. I think they're taking football seriously now the way they always should have. George Klavikov, the former casino executive out of Las Vegas. And obviously any plans for the Pac-12 moving forward, USC is going to be at the center of all of that. But, man, if I'm a coach that is the caliber of the kind of person that USC would want to hire, then I want to be at a place that really has my back, that's really looking to support me, that's looking to just value college athletics and treat me like I'm a big deal, because that's what college coaches at that level want to be treated like. And at USC, man, a lot of stuff besides college football seems to be a big deal. And in California, a lot of stuff besides college football seems to be a big deal. In the Pac-12, a lot of stuff besides college football seems to be a big deal, fixated on sports that just don't move the needle from a revenue standpoint. And if I'm a college coach, I'm looking somewhere else. So if James Franklin can leverage USC to get a raise at Penn State, he'd probably do it. But if he's looking to win a national championship, I actually think at a place like State College, where you can reach into Western Pennsylvania, you can reach into the Ohio area, you can reach into some of those pockets of the Midwest where there is talent, I think James Franklin has a better chance of winning a national championship at Penn State than he does at USC, even though obviously USC's won national championships more recently. The world's changed. We referenced with our commenters a moment ago, 2004, and that great, Bush Leinart era led by Pete Carroll. It ain't the same USC. It ain't the same California. The best players in California are leaving that state in droves to come play in the SEC, and I'm sure many of you have noticed. So how does this impact the SEC? I think you'll watch more rumors unfold, and as one rumor pops up for a guy going somewhere, that opens the door for somebody else to maybe go somewhere else. I think you'll also look to see if a guy like Dan Mullen, who's pushed his own name, I believe, for NFL jobs, things like that, does he eventually emerge as a candidate here? That's probably worth paying attention to. Ed Orgeron's shot this down already. Orgeron, I think, feels like he was treated poorly at USC the last time he was there, and also he's having to fight to keep the job that he has now. Lane Kiffin also once fired at USC. Would he possibly consider going back there? I don't know. But it's going to be an interesting story because these college football coaching rumor mills almost always are. Hey, we're running a little bit late here, so let me see if I can kind of bounce on for a moment. I think the Tulane-Ole Miss game's fun on Saturday. I think the Green Wave have a chance to play it close, and I think they're doing something pretty cool. I also never know what's real and what's not. You know, there's so much social media stuff these days that you never know what's a joke and what's actually real. But I think this is real, that when Tulane plays Ole Miss Saturday, they're going to wear a sticker on the back of their helmet that says SEC champs, obviously honoring the 3 times they were champs in the league back when the Green Wave was in the league, 1934, 1939, 1949. I think that's really cool. I also think that Tulane versus Ole Miss is one of the best uniform games in all of college football. Tulane has awesome uniforms. I love the Green Wave logo. Ole Miss, I think, has pretty cool uniforms too. So this is a good uniform game. Tulane, better team than some people realize, and I guess the sticker on the back of the helmet, I have to say, I think that's probably pretty cool. All right, we're going to do a funny Nick Saban-themed SEC LOL in just a moment. Before that, though, let me take a couple of more comments, and we'll get ready to bounce out of here today. To Neil Calvino checking in from California, of course. One of the things in California that we do like is our buddy Tennille, and glad to have her as part of the conversation. Trip going back and forth with George here in the comment section. Mark Morris, who, by the way, lives in the state of Florida, so he's got a little bit of vested interest in Urban Meyer here, says, calls him Urban Liar, came out and said he wasn't going to USC, just saying. So Meyer has a little bit of a history of lying, maybe kind of checking in and doing just that there. Let's see what else on the Facebook side of things here for a moment. We'll check in there. Shannon Cullum saying, I might be late, but what about them hogs? Whoa, pig suey. Shannon, you're exactly right. You know, the show a lot of times is kind of a look ahead of the next week, but I don't think anything bigger in college football has happened in the SEC, certainly this year, than the win that Arkansas got against Texas. And you better believe, Shannon, in the weeks to come, we're going to be talking a lot about Arkansas on this show. I think that Sam Pittman's really building something there. And I know we have a lot of Arkansas fans kind of check in from time to time, and I've said this over and over again. I love the coordinators that he hired. I think it's really cool, the experience they have on that roster right now. I know they're still probably trying to figure out a little bit what they have in KJ Jefferson. But, man, beating Texas and Steve Sarkisian's second game is a big deal. Doing that in front of your home fans in Fayetteville is very, very sweet. This is really good stuff right now, and it's happening in Arkansas. And I think if you're a Hogs fan, you got to be very happy with what you're seeing. A couple more comments. We'll get ready to bounce out. Brian Burnett wondering about a Lane Kiffin retread back to USC. I mean, Kiffin would do it. I mean, Kiffin would do anything, right? I mean, there's nothing that he wouldn't at least consider doing. But if you're USC, could you really do that? The guy that you once fired on the tarmac, could you really bring him back? I mean, he's a sharp play caller. There's no denying that. And he's obviously probably a little bit grown up from what he was when he last had the job. But boy, I don't know. Scotty Gorp weighing in on the same topic. Joel Moody also says Primetime wants the Florida State job. Yeah, that's another one you got to start thinking about. After losing to Jacksonville State, Mike Norvell, and at a certain point in time, if you understand, like if you're my age, like Florida State from the time I was in about the third grade to the time I graduated college, Florida State was in the top 5 every year. This was as a successful program as you could be. Some say they didn't win as many national championships they should have. That's still a couple of national championships over that span and a top 5 ranking every dadgum year. And now they can't buy a win against Jacksonville State. Boy, at a certain point you wonder, can you ever even get back to a shadow of what you once used to be? Kevin Grubb says they should all go try to steal Lincoln Riley. Yeah, I wonder what Lincoln Riley's long-term plans are. I really do. I mean, I've always assumed that eventually he'd go like a lot of these Big 12-style play callers have done and maybe go to the NFL. But maybe he doesn't want to. I wonder what his future looks like. And, Riley is a little bit more hireable than he once was because certainly last year you had good offense over at Oklahoma. They're also playing a little bit better defense by the end of the year. Let's see what else. One more on YouTube maybe. Yeah, so Greg Steele says, I don't know what that even means, but Greg, I'm glad you're checking in nonetheless. All right, let me get ready to wrap up here. By the way, Mark Moore says y'all go watch the YouTube SEC Shorts video on Texas, the Arkansas game. Those SEC Shorts people, we've showed them before. They're really pretty funny. They do a really good job all the way around. You know who else does a really good job? My friends at Merriweather and Tharp. They're your source for Georgia divorce, but you don't have to be in Georgia take advantage of the resources that they bring to the table, the things that they do. They take really good care of you when it comes to your situation, and it's a situation that matters, right? Because if you find yourself going through a divorce, it can be a scary and confusing time, and the thing that makes it a little bit easier to deal with is the advocacy they provide, helping you understand how the law works for you, how the law matters in your situation. The things that impact you when it comes to divorce, your finances, your relationship with your children, all of these things are elements that are impacted by the divorce process. And Meriwether and Tharp wants you to understand all of that and really use the law to your advantage to set yourself up for an enjoyable next season of your life. So they're theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's the website, theatlantadivorceteam.com. They're your source for Georgia divorce. But listen, whatever state you're living in, obviously all across SEC country here, just check in from wherever you are. Listen to their podcast, read their blog post, look at the information they're providing you. And then when you set up your initial consultation with them, well, obviously at that point in time, you'll be more equipped to ask and get better information by asking better questions throughout that entire process. They're good friends of mine too. I love Bob Tharp and Jason, the whole team over there. The work that they're doing is something that makes me very proud. I feel good about the recommendation I can make of them to you. So check them out online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Thanks for being with us here today. We'd like to kind of finish things up on kind of a light note, and we'll do so right now. Nick Saban has been in Alabama for a long time, and obviously Saban's kind of cultivated his own kind of personality there. And I think for a lot of the media, there's a lot of curiosity about what is it really like with Saban behind closed doors. And one of the members of the Alabama roster, Jordan Battle, this week was asked about that. Now, I have to give you two honest pieces of information. If I played you the full video, this would be a little funnier, but I had to edit part of this for content reasons. And if I had the reasons to kind of like explain all of this to those of you that may not be fully aware of this, it'd be a little funnier too. So I can't really do either of those two things because we're going to keep this all family friendly around here and all of that. But if you know, that's one of those things. So here's the thing that I think makes this video I'm about to play, or the audio I'm about to play for you, so funny, is that the moment in the press conference sort of starts off as a very typical press conference question, the press conference style answer, but then it takes a sharp right turn, and boy, things go downhill quickly. This is Jordan Battle discussing what it's like behind the scenes with Alabama coach Nick Saban as a part of our SEC LOL for today.
Yeah, I've asked a couple of the other older guys about this, but do you have a favorite saying that Saban has, one of his little coaching, quips he has?
Not that I can think of right now because he has so many, but there are a few I like, and he always talking about touch D's or all that.
I don't know how to follow that one up.
As I said before, that's one of those, you either know it or you don't. And if you know, you know. Very funny stuff from Mr. Battle this week, talking about the jokes that Nick Saban likes to tell behind the scenes there around Alabama football. Pretty funny stuff all the way around. Big thanks to all of you for being with us today as part of SEC Country Live. Really appreciate that, and hope you are getting ready to enjoy some great football here this weekend. Bama, Florida, Auburn on the road at Penn State, Georgia hosting South Carolina. Interesting slate of games. We'll be back next Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, to talk about them all with you once again and look ahead to the following week, too. It's SEC Country Live. Thanks so much for being with us.